The emergency meeting wasn't scheduled. No calendar invite, no subject line. Just a message marked urgent, sent to executives one by one. When they arrived, the screen was already on. A single graph filled the room. Revenue dropping, retention collapsing, client trust eroding faster than anyone had predicted. At the bottom of the slide, one word. Intervention. No one asked who had written it. They already knew. Because this wasn't the first crisis. It was the third. And each time the company had survived by borrowing time it didn't understand how to repay. The consultant's name was Orrin Vale. He didn't work for them. That was the point. Orrin had been recommended by the board's legal advisors after the second incident, when an internal review quietly concluded that the company could no longer trust its own diagnostics. Too close, too biased, too compromised. Orrin arrived calm. He didn't promise miracles. He promised clarity, which, in a room full of executives who hadn't slept properly in months, sounded like mercy. He asked for access, not to people, to systems, logs, historical decisions, incident reports that had been marked resolved but never fully explained. Orrin spoke little during his first week. He listened, watched, took notes by hand, even though everything else was digital. That detail mattered later, because handwritten notes don't leave logs. On the seventh day, Orrin presented his findings, not in a deck, in a story. He walked them through their last 18 months like a crime scene, showed how small compromises had accumulated, how short-term fixes had become dependencies, how certain teams had learned to silence alarms instead of solving problems. You don't have a single failure, Orrin said. You have a pattern. No one argued, because hearing it out loud felt like relief. For the first time, someone else was holding the weight. Orrin proposed a plan: temporary authority, direct reporting to the board, the power to override internal objections for stabilization purposes. It was meant to last 90 days. Everyone agreed. They didn't notice how easily. The first changes were popular. Problematic managers reassigned. Redundant processes eliminated. Clients reassured with confidence that felt earned. Revenue stabilized. Retention recovered. Employees started saying the same thing in different ways. Finally, someone competent. Orrin didn't celebrate. He warned them. Stability doesn't mean safety, he said. It means the system has stopped screaming. They extended his contract, then extended it again. What no one realized was that Orrin wasn't fixing the system. He was redefining what normal looked like. Ren Halvors was the first to feel uneasy. He worked in internal analytics, the kind of role that noticed things too late to matter unless someone listened. Ren noticed that incidents were being resolved faster, too fast. Root causes were shorter, follow-ups minimal, escalations rare. It looked efficient, but it felt hollow. Ren compared old incident reports with new ones. The language had changed. Less explanation, more certainty, almost as if the company had decided not to remember certain questions anymore. Ren asked around. People shrugged. Orrin signed off. That name had started to function like a verdict. Ren pulled historical logs, trying to understand what had changed structurally. What he found wasn't tampering. It was alignment. Systems weren't being overridden. They were being nudged. Thresholds adjusted. Risk tolerances redefined. What counted as acceptable loss quietly increased. Nothing illegal. Nothing explicit. Just a shift in what the company was willing to live with. Ren scheduled a meeting with Orrin. It was polite, professional. Orrin listened carefully, then said something that stayed with Ren long after. "You're asking the wrong question," Orrin said. "You're trying to find where things broke." "And?" Wren asked. And I'm showing you where they were always fragile. Wren left the meeting unsettled. Because Orrin wasn't wrong. That was the problem. Weeks later, the company announced record recovery. The board praised Orrin publicly. Employees relaxed, and that's when the first client disappeared. Not loudly, no lawsuit, no public complaint. Just a quiet termination of contract. Then another, then a third. Each one had been flagged internally as acceptable loss. Wren checked the model that justified those flags. It had been updated, approved, by Orrin. Wren stared at the approval timestamp. It predated the incidents, which meant the model hadn't reacted. It had anticipated. That was the moment Wren understood something had gone very wrong. Because Orrin hadn't just responded to crises. He had learned how to predict them. And prediction, in the wrong hands, isn't prevention. It's leverage. Wren pulled deeper logs. Not the reports Orrin had shown, the ones beneath them. And for the first time, he saw a pattern that didn't belong to the company's past. It belonged to Orrin's arrival. A slow increase in tolerable failure. A quiet normalization of loss. A business learning, step by step, to survive worse conditions than before. Not because it had to, but because someone was teaching it how. Wren closed his laptop and sat still. Because if Orrin had trained the company to endure pain, the next question was why. And the answer, whatever it was, wouldn't be good. The loss of the third client didn't trigger alarms. That was the first sign something had shifted too far. No emergency meeting, no escalation, just a line item marked acceptable churn and quietly closed. Wren Halvors noticed it immediately, not because the client was large, but because the reasoning felt rehearsed. The internal report didn't ask why the client left. It explained why the company would be fine without them. That difference mattered. Wren pulled earlier churn reports and compared them. The language was changing over time, drifting away from investigation toward justification. Less curiosity, more certainty. The thresholds had moved. What once required explanation now required only acknowledgement. Wren followed the trail back to the model. The retention risk framework had been updated twice in the last 6 months. Both updates were approved by Orrin Vale. That alone wasn't suspicious. Consultants approve models all the time. What troubled Wren was the timing. Each update preceded a client loss, not followed it, which meant the system wasn't responding to reality. It was preparing for it. Wren scheduled another meeting with Orrin. This time, Orrin didn't seem surprised. "You're mapping symptoms," Orrin said after listening. "Not causes." Wren leaned forward. "Then show me the cause." Orrin smiled slightly. "Stability has a cost. You just weren't paying it before." Wren pressed. "And now we are?" "Yes," Orrin said, "but consciously." That answer disturbed Wren more than denial would have. Because Orrin wasn't hiding, he was reframing. Over the next weeks, small failures became normalized. A delayed release blamed on market conditions. A compliance exception approved temporarily. A team dissolved because it asked for resources Orrin deemed inefficient. Each decision made sense in isolation. Together they formed a pattern. The company wasn't fixing problems. It was learning which problems to tolerate. Wren took his concerns to his manager. The response was polite. Orrin had board backing. The numbers were improving. Investor confidence was returning. "This is what recovery looks like," his manager said. Wren left the office that day with a knot in his stomach. Because recovery shouldn't feel like amnesia. The first employee to leave wasn't fired. She was repositioned. A senior analyst named Illyra Cade, known for pushing back during reviews. Her role was redefined. Her access reduced, her responsibilities scattered. 2 weeks later, she resigned. No farewell email, no announcement, just another quiet subtraction. Wren checked the internal justification. Risk alignment, team cohesion, strategic focus, all approved by Oren. Wren began to suspect something worse than manipulation. He suspected design. He pulled historical data from before Oren's arrival, then overlaid changes made since. The curve was unmistakable. Tolerance for failure had increased. Tolerance for dissent had decreased. The company was becoming more resilient, but less human. Wren confronted Oren again, this time without pretense. "You're training the company to survive worse outcomes," Wren said. "Why?" Oren didn't deny it. "Because resilience isn't free," he said. "You either pay for it deliberately or you bleed when it's forced on you." Wren stared at him. "And who decides the price?" Oren met his gaze. "Someone has to." That was the moment Wren understood. Oren wasn't just advising the company. He was redefining its pain threshold. And whoever controls pain tolerance controls behavior. Days later, Wren found something that confirmed his fear. An internal scenario model labeled stress event, external shock. It simulated a crisis that hadn't happened yet. Revenue loss, client exits, regulatory pressure, and beneath it, a note. Prepared. The model wasn't defensive. It was rehearsed. Wren closed the file slowly. Because if Oren had rehearsed a crisis, then the real question wasn't whether another collapse was coming. It was who would benefit when it did. Wren stopped sleeping properly. Not because of stress, because patterns don't wait for rest. He began mapping Oren's past work, not through resumes or testimonials, but through outcomes. Companies Oren had stabilized, crises he had resolved, recoveries he had been praised for. At first, it looked impressive. Then Wren noticed something disturbing. Every company Oren worked with had survived a major disruption, and almost every one of them had experienced another disruption shortly after Oren left. Different forms, different excuses, same shape. Wren dug deeper. The pattern wasn't collapse, it was dependency. Oren specialized in organizations already weakened by internal compromise. He didn't create instability from nothing. He amplified existing fragility, then positioned himself as the only one who understood it well enough to manage. The more brittle the system, the more valuable Oren became. Wren found a case study buried in a consulting archive, a company remarkably similar to theirs. Same growth curve, same internal silencing of alarms, same praise for resilience improvements. 6 months after Oren's departure, that company announced a sudden merger under distressed terms. Oren Vale was listed as an external advisor. He hadn't just helped them survive. He had profited from the conditions survival created. Wren felt cold, because now the rehearsed crisis model made sense. Oren wasn't predicting collapse. He was pricing it. Wren brought his findings to the board liaison quietly. The response was measured. Uncomfortable. Oren's contract included clauses tied to extraordinary operational events. Bonuses, equity conversion options, contingency compensation. He didn't get paid for stability. He got paid for shocks. Wren realized then that Oren didn't need to cause a crisis directly. He only needed to ensure the company was prepared to accept one. And preparation, done the wrong way, becomes permission. Internal language had already shifted. Losses were managed. Departures were aligned. Pressure was expected. The company was being trained not to resist pain. It was being trained to absorb it quietly. Wren confronted Oren one last time. "You don't prevent disasters," Wren said. You make them survivable. Oren didn't deny it. Survival is the most valuable state a company can reach, he replied, because fear doesn't disappear. It becomes leverage. Wren's voice hardened. Leverage for whom? Oren smiled faintly. For whoever understands it first. That night, Wren checked the scenario model again. It had updated, not expanded, refined. The projected crisis window was narrower now, closer. Wren understood the truth before he could prove it. The company wasn't heading toward uncertainty. It was heading toward a scheduled impact, and Oren would be ready when it hit, because he always was. The crisis didn't arrive suddenly. That was the final deception. There was no single breaking point, no headline moment, no call in the middle of the night. Instead, the company entered what Oren later described as a compression phase. Budgets tightened, priorities shifted. Teams were asked to do more with less. Everything Oren had rehearsed. The first regulatory inquiry arrived on a Tuesday morning. Minor, procedural. A request for clarification, nothing more. Oren responded before legal could even assemble. Prepared, calm, confident. The second inquiry followed 2 weeks later, broader, more pointed, still manageable, still within expectations. Wren watched the dashboards change color slowly. Not red, never red, just muted shades of yellow that became normal too quickly. Then a client announced a pause, not a termination. A pause. The market reacted anyway. The board convened. Emergency language returned to calendars. The word resilience resurfaced, heavier now, less optimistic. Oren took control of the room without raising his voice. "This is the scenario we modeled," he said. "If you follow the framework, you'll absorb the impact." No one asked why the framework fit so perfectly. Wren finally spoke. "This isn't survival," he said. "It's fulfillment." The room stilled. Oren turned toward him, not angry, not defensive. "You wanted certainty," Oren replied. "This is what certainty costs." Within days, Oren's contingency clauses activated. Compensation adjusted. Advisory authority expanded. Decision rights consolidated. All legal, all approved, all inevitable. Wren submitted his report that same night. Not to regulators, not to the board, to the company archive. He labeled it plainly. Pre-event record. He knew what would happen next. The report would be acknowledged, logged, and quietly deprioritized. Because the company was too busy surviving. Oren's final recommendation came during the 4th week of the crisis. A strategic divestment, a controlled contraction, a future-facing realignment. In simpler terms, sell part of the company under pressure, while the terms were still reasonable. The board approved it. They told themselves they had no choice. The announcement was public the next morning. Stock dipped, then stabilized. Analysts praised the decisive leadership. Oren Vale was named external advisor to the acquiring entity. The same role, the same distance, the same calm authority. Wren watched the news alone from his desk, because now he understood the full shape of it. Oren didn't cause the crisis. He engineered inevitability. He taught companies how to accept pain early, quietly, and rationally, so that when collapse arrived, it felt earned, necessary, even responsible. Weeks later, Wren received an automated system notification, routine, archival. His report had been reclassified. Status, historical reference, not urgent, not actionable, just preserved. Wren closed the alert. Outside, the company continued operating under new ownership, leaner and quieter than before. Orrin had already moved on, and the most unsettling truth wasn't that he had profited from the crisis. It was that everyone involved believed it was the best possible outcome. Because once a company learns to survive anything, it will accept everything.